Okay, so thank you so much, Mr. Rogers, for coming on and participating in the interview that we do for Setsi. You know, like I said before, there's just dime gems that are being given out, and just by seeing the results of the people that are subscribing to our YouTube channel and listening in to go-getters and people that are making a difference in community like yourself, it really shows. And we thank you once again for doing this for us. So before we start, we always like to begin all things by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. All right, so if you can please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and tell us a little bit about your remarkable work.
Okay, I'm Nelson Rogers. I have a master's degree in social work with a specialty in social policy and administration from Carleton University, and I have a Doctor of Education from University of Toronto. My research specialty in my doctorate was in rural community colleges and the role that rural community college campuses play in community development in the locations they're in. I worked for Algonquin College for 30 years, almost 30 years, including positions in research management and also in strategic planning. I've been retired for about a decade now and have a small research and consulting business that focuses mainly on rural community development issues. And in recent years, more and more of my requests from rural municipal staff and rural NGO staff, the requests have been around data issues. Not so much data access, because there have been a lot of developments in making data available, lots of developments from Statistics Canada in increasing the number and frequency of data releases, particularly those related to rural Canada. But it's some of the staff just feel like they're drowning in data and have difficulty making sense of it and finding the data that's most relevant to their particular issue or situation. And so while I do a lot of that through my consulting business, I also was able to get support from OMAFRA, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and from Valley Heartland, CFDC, to develop a program in data literacy and data capacity building, which I call Big Data for Small Places. And it's a very simple 6-stage process to just walk through how to refine the questions that you're concerned about and the relationship to your community, how to find the relevant data, and then how to use that data to evaluate a policy or a program or to develop a plan. And the resources for that have been some additional resources for that were funded by the Federal Center for Rural Economic Development, and the resources are now available through the website of Rural Ontario Institute. So you can find that on the ROI website with under the resources section, Big Data for Small Places. So that's one thing that I've been doing. But my recent work with Rural Ontario Institute is advising the development of a data dashboard, and the indicators on the particular dashboard that I'm working on are around indicators of rural community well-being. So specific indicators of well-being under themes of economic, social, environmental, health, and housing well-being, and identifying data sources and then importing the data into the dashboard. So someone who's interested in understanding the well-being of their community, that they can go to one dashboard and find their community and find their the data that's relevant to their particular issue that they're interested in. This work is based on a national standard for indicators of rural community well-being. And I was through some work that my business partner and I did in rural data. We caught the attention of several federal government departments, and we were referred to the Standards Council of Canada for about the development of a national standard, and that was quite an involved process. We had an advisory committee of 25 rural researchers from across Canada, and the first edition of the standard was published last year, and this work that Rural Ontario Institute is doing now is the first comprehensive test of the usability of a national standard for assessing well-being in rural communities. So that's advising that project is my main business now, but I've become known in rural areas, so I get email requests all the time from community groups saying, oh, we have a rural transit group going and we're just looking for some data that would help us understand our situation. And a lot of that work I do pro bono. It just helps rural communities find the data they need to make a good case for whatever project they're working on.
That's amazing. Wow. Absolutely amazing. And can you articulate your personal mission and vision for us?
Well, my career and my recent research, and even going back several years in my master's degree, social work research, and starting my doctoral research 25 years ago, really been on a focus on rural community prosperity and quality of life. And the Canadian federal government uses a definition of rural that's very very tight, very restrictive, and makes rural Canada appear very small. And when you look at some of the definitions of rural and small town communities that are used internationally, the percentage of people in Canada in predominantly rural regions or in small towns that serve rural regions, it's a much higher percentage. So the official Statistics Canada number is something like 17 or 18% of Canadians are in rural areas. But using other international definitions, you're looking at something around 25% or so of Canadians live in rural areas, and it's a much neglected area in terms of federal and provincial policies and programs. So I guess my goal is making life better in rural communities. But since, as I mentioned, I've been mostly retired for about a decade, and my more recent goals have been to work with staff who are working in this field of rural community well-being and rural community development. And I know I'm being successful when I'm in a room of people that are half my age. And I'm really trying to build the capacity of the next generation to take up this work. I've really seen, 10 or 15 years ago, if I went to a chief administrative officer or someone in that kind of position in a rural community, I would often get, when I start talking about rural data, I would get reactions like, I don't need your stupid numbers. My family's lived in this community for generations. And I'm getting much less of that now. There's been in rural communities much more interest in data and much more, I would say, more awareness of the quality, varying quality of data from different sources, and the importance of looking for high quality data, and understanding what the data is. Just an example of an issue that I come up with against quite often is there is some published well-being data that's based on surveys of people's feelings of well-being. In the communities where I've looked at that closely, I'm not finding a close match between the actual more, I would say, objective. I don't usually use the word objective, but more solid measurements of actual community well-being when you're looking at actual data on um, average income, on health indicators, on crime indicators, and you look at the hard data and then you compare it to people's feelings of well-being, there's often not a correlation. People have feelings of well-being for a lot of different reasons, and for, say, a municipal government or a community NGO to start on a program to address well-being in their community, they need to be clear on, are you really addressing crime statistics, for example, or are you addressing people's feelings about crime statistics? And those are two very different things. So I'm finding much more sophisticated discussions about data, what the data means and how to use it, than I did, say, a decade ago.
Very good, and that's a great point that you made too, because we have to be able to decipher the two. It's very important, to really get that sense of wellness within the rural community. So very good. And what inspires you most about your current work?
What inspires me? Oh, well, interesting conversation I had with a business person in a small community near here, and I just mentioned about the work that I'm doing, and I said, I'm working with these young people that are the age of my kids, and I said, and they're wonderful to work with. They're so well educated and so eager and using new technologies, using social media, using some new types of information technologies and GIS-based data systems, and that was just fascinating, delightful to work with. And the woman said to me, "I'm so surprised to hear you say that. When you mentioned you were working with the younger generation, I figured you were going to say, oh no, a bunch of slackers. It's a real pain to work with them." And I said, maybe I live a charmed life or something, but I'm not finding that. I am not finding that at all. And the had a meeting yesterday with a couple of college professors, much younger than myself, and trying to get some college students to work with us on some issues around rural data, some technical issues that really need some very technical expertise. And the profs were just so supportive and so encouraging about this kind of work. So that what inspires me, the next generation that's coming up through the ranks, that's working in rural community development and working in rural data, um, those kind of issues. It's quite encouraging. It's really the future's in good hands.
Oh yes, yes. Trust me, I have a 1-year-old grandbaby going on 5. It's like, they're so advanced. It's like they already pre-wired for this type, this time around, as I like to say. So that's
Right.
incredible. That's incredible. So what challenges or barriers do you face in your work, and how are you and any, if you have a team or anybody that you work with, how do you overcome them?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't have a team anymore. My business partner retired in the middle of COVID, and we had a number of business challenges that were indirectly related to COVID, and some staffing problems, some funding problems, and that we just decided to wind down the business. So over the last couple of years, I've laid off all our employees, and my business partner is retired. So it's been a time of transition. I'm really focusing more on helping others, as particularly the younger generation, develop their organizations and develop their businesses. And I can see I've retired twice already. I'm going to give it a third go and see if it works. But you know, I'm going to retire again someday. And though I have some bad examples in my family, and my grandfather told me near the end of his life that he retired 5 times. So yeah, that I don't think I'm going to make 5 retirements. But anyway, that the challenges. Yeah, a challenge that I've encountered in a number of contexts is politicians, and particularly, but not exclusively, municipal politicians don't believe that there are votes to be gained from data-based and evidence-based decision making. They believe the votes are to be gained in hot button issues of the day, and whether they have data to support whether the issue is a real issue or a figment of somebody's imagination, no interest. So it's chasing the votes. So in a community near here, which I'll just give this one example, community near here that made some decisions. They had in the area at stoplights, they had some stoplights have the pedestrian signal is just a white person or a red hand, just 2 signals. And other ones had a countdown number on it with so many seconds and that. And the municipal staff did research on that and found there were more pedestrian accidents with the countdown number than with the 2 signal. It seems like pedestrians look at the numbers rather than look at the traffic and run out into traffic and get hit. So the staff said, based on the statistics, they advised the discontinuation of the numbers and going back to the 2 signals. The municipal council, several local councillors said, but my constituents asked me to put in more countdown numbers and I need their votes. So I'm going to vote for more countdown numbers because that's what my constituents voted me in for. So intentional disregard of data in order to gain votes. So I could give you 100 examples of that, but I think that story makes the issue clear. And that's a challenge that I have confronted in so many contexts and made, I would say, very little headway on that. So I don't know where to go with that. Anyway, that's
yeah. Well, that's definitely a challenge that is a work in progress. We hope that there's some resolve on that for sure.
Yeah. So
and
I call it evidence avoidant decision making.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And okay, so ultimate goal. What's your ultimate goal, and what does success look like for you?
Success would look like for me is to see the younger generation take up some of the work that I've done. There's some particular research gaps around rural community colleges and their role in the campuses. And when I started on that field of research, somebody told me the way to be outstanding in your field is pick a very small field. So at the time that I started researching on rural community college campuses, there was just nobody else in Canada doing that. So I became the expert in it because it just wasn't research. So I'm looking at some people that are doing some research in that area, but I would like to see some more. I'm also working, this is a longer story than I can really fully recount, but working on a national network for rural data. And I've got some support from the Canadian Rural Revitalization Foundation, and we're just working through the process of how to set that up. I'm really one of the goals of that is to hand off this work in rural data to other people, particularly to younger people and people early in their career that can make a career out of better use of rural data. So it's really I guess my goals revolve around generational transitions and generational transition of knowledge. You know, like my former business partner, Bob Leach, he and I worked on some very early stage rural broadband research in the 90s when people didn't know what broadband was. And then Bob worked for Industry Canada and Broadband for Rural and Northern Development. And, you know, Bob likes to be retired, but he's just a walking encyclopedia of rural broadband issues. So we encourage people to pick his brain on occasion because there's lessons being relearned in rural broadband today that we identified, 30 years ago, and some of the solutions are fairly similar. The technology is different, but the implementation of the technology goes through the same kinds of processes. So I'm really hoping that we can find ways to bridge that, pass on knowledge from people who've been in the field of, particularly in the field of rural research, and rural social development, rural economic development, and pass on that knowledge to the upcoming generation. So they're not starting from square one, but they're starting on a knowledge base to really make their communities thrive.
Exactly. And now we have Mr. Elon Musk with the satellite internet now, that's gone global. So now it's broadband so it's always developing so rapidly. So you're so right with that, with the rural communities. They need to be up to speed, sure. And okay, so we're almost done. Do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action?
Calls to action. Yeah. I guess the slogan that we used in Big Data for Small Places is maybe a type of call to action, but the reason we developed that and implemented that program was to build capacity for rural. And the slogan we used with it is turning data into understanding and understanding into action. So rural data is not just about trivial pursuit and knowing a bunch of numbers. It's about using data to really understand your community and understand the community needs and the community opportunities, and then turn that knowledge into understanding and understanding into action, and have some course of action, some evidence informed course of action that really makes a difference. So that's what I'm hoping that my work has done, and the writing and the research that I've done, the different forums that have opportunities to speak in. That's what I'm hoping the result is. Turn data into understanding and understanding into action.
Love it. Love it. I'll definitely remember that one for sure. Okay, well, Mr. Roger, I really, really appreciate it. On behalf of Setsi, we appreciate all the dedication that you put in over the years. I know you said you retired a few times, and I totally get it. My dad is the same way too. So we really appreciate all the work that you put in and you continue to put in. So we will close the way that we opened by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So once again, on behalf of Setsi, we really appreciate you, and thanks again. And it will be uploaded for everyone to enjoy and learn from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.